Hey, what's up? It's Orion with Avant Samples. Today I'm going to be showing you 3 different drops that I made using our newest sample pack, Avant Techno, running you through them, showing you pretty much like the basics and how to get started making techno. If you want to follow along with any of the samples used in this tutorial, check down in the description. We'll have a link in there and a discount code. When I set out to make this pack, I wanted it to be easy for a beginner to start making techno, but also be beneficial to your favorite DJs, your favorite artists, your favorite whoever. Like I said, I have 3 different examples to show you and run through. We're going to start off with the kick and rumbles. The kicks and rumbles, I think, are like the foundation to any techno song. It's like super melodic techno where it's just like a kick, you got a kick there, right? To all the way to industrial, super distorted kicks. It's just the same kick over and over again for the whole song. That's pretty much what techno is. That's pretty much what house is. That being said, the kick and rumble, in my opinion, are kind of the foundation to building out a techno song. So if you have a kick and rumble that's kind of lacking, then you kind of got a lacking song, in my opinion. So with our first one, let's take a listen to it. When I made this one, I wanted it to be darker and more minimal. So with this one, we have like a large kick kind of filling up majority of the frequencies, but it's deep and kind of hits you, And then it's also paired with like a more minimal, subby, not overly saturated rumble. So this one, I have Avant Techno Rumble 6. So this rumble is in the key of A. So I pitched that down 7 semitones. So now it's in the key of D. I have a low pass filter on it. It's just cutting out the high ends. Like I said, I want it to be minimal and subby. Felt a little bit dry in between some of like the rumbles. It's like a fluttery almost. So I have like a reverb filling that out, a convolution reverb filling that out. It's very slightly, 25%. And then I have an amp as well. And that's adding just on 20%, but it's adding more like low mids and a little bit of high end that you can hear. And then I'm also layering this with atmosphere that I made. It has a tonality to it, which helps with making the track feel glued together and also adding body into the original rumble because it's very low MIDI. And the two of them together sound like this. You can hear that like the 5th over top, just very slightly with this atmosphere. And then I have that sidechained with this plugin called Duck Buddy. And it's really, really beneficial to have something where you can see the individual like waves or the waves that it's creating. And it's something that you can be able to link your kick into. So you can see that you have the kick coming in. And then you also have like the waveform of this group that it's getting fed. You can see where it's stuck in. So the reason why I think this is super beneficial is you can see how your kick and rumble or your sub or whatever, how it's interacting with your kick and the frequencies in it. So with waves, you have a positive and a negative. So you have a 0 line and then, so like say a sine wave, it goes up and then it goes back down an equal amount. That is a classic sine wave. So say you have, this is a very, very basic way of phasing, kind of. And it's a thing you got to learn with sound. So you have the ups and the downs, right? And say that you have the same wave, but just off a little bit. It will actually interact with the ups and downs and change how high and how low those cycles are going. So when you view it in here, the purple line is, in our case, the kick and the rumble summed together. So the kick is in the blue and the rumble is in the green, and then the purple is it summed together. You can see you don't really have any crazy bow tying from right about here where the main rumble kind of comes in. That's the area that you want to be focused on when you're trying to get things in phase. Rumbles are super phasey. That's kind of what makes a rumble a rumble. It's the inconsistency of the cycles. So, but you want to make sure that you don't have any crazy bow ties. So if we add in a little bit of a delay, 10 seconds, you can see you have like a bow tie here, and you can hear how the sound changed as well. Or even, let's have that, you have an even bigger bow tie here. And a bow tie is, you have the bow tie, small in the center, big on the sides. That's kind of what a bow tie is. So you have that going on here. And how I got this acting how it is, I went into the cycle. So I just looped one cycle here. I had this opened up off to the side, and I just played with, if you drag that out with a clip after it, you can play around with it and get the cycles right. So I just played around with this, getting the cycles right, while also maintaining like a groove in the bass or in the rumble. You can feel it's kind of pulling, the rumble's kind of pulling you into that next one. And say, this one looks in phase, but you lose that like pulling sensation. It feels like you're getting held back. So that's what I did, and then that's how I just get a good sub going on and sub kick and rumble relation. Cool. So that's pretty much the kick and rumble of our loop, of our first loop. Let's take a listen to our second loop. So our second loop is more in your face sounding. Cool. So this one, more in your face. It has a saturated kick with like a higher top layer to get it really standing out. Let's go through the processing of this one. So shortened up the kick. It's a higher BPM. Longer kicks, they take up a little bit too much space sometimes in the mix, and that you can't really let certain elements through, so I shortened this one up. This is what the original kick sounds like. Distorted a little bit. And then I also added in a top layer. It just sounds like this. It's just the mid top frequencies with a little bit of reverb. Just very subtle, but it adds a ton. This top, just found a kick that I liked. I like the airiness of the attack. It has like a white noisy kind of sound to it, but I wasn't too big of a fan on the low end, the body of it. So I just took the high end from it. And it sounds organic with the reverb. Without it, it doesn't sound too organic. I think it just adds a nice texture to it. Cool. EQ. Saturator, very minimal. 32%, not much, but it is saturated a lot, so I mixed it in with the original, and so it wasn't as in your face. A little too much. Just very subtle. Just adds a little bit to it. Alright, onto the rumble. This first rumble, without any processing. It's very low-endy, but I wanted to have a little bit more texture to it. So I just turned it up in volume pretty much, crushed a little bit of the dynamics with the distortion, and then I added in a amplifier, an amp, just an Ableton stock amp. And the key to getting a good amp sound is using a cabinet. So this is just default amp preset, right? And EQing out the low end because this is a parallel effect. So you have the original dry, and then you have that high end. Just a little bit overbearing, so I'm using this in the parallel, and to really get that real amp sound and not too crunchy, you use a condenser. And if you want to keep the stereo width, change it from the output from mono to dual on both the cabinet and the amp. And with the dry, cool. That's pretty simple right there. And then this is just layered with a texture that I mangled up a little bit. This is the original sample for it. This is what it sounds like after some processing. So what the auto filter is doing is adding a groove to it and kind of like just chopping it at every 16th note. It's a 30-second note on and then a 30-second note off pretty much. And I'm just doing that with an auto pan, turn down the phase, and then you just mess with the shape and rate on a triangle. See, it's just constant, a little bit too much distortion, not enough groove. And this EQ is accentuating a frequency that is getting overdriven more than the rest of the frequencies. So playing with stuff like that can get really cool effects because it just distorts that frequency more than any other frequency. And then overdrive, making it louder, making it more distorted, and then this EQ focusing in on this original frequency here. And then reverb, filling it up to stereo space. Cool. Same exact thing with the sidechain. I did the same exact thing as before with the last one, just on different channels pretty much. So same thing, different shape, matching it to the kick. And then that's pretty much it. The same exact thing as the last one. You can feel the rumble coming in on that like upbeat. It's the same one as the hat. It just adds a little bit more groove as well. Instead of just having like a static boom, 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 you know, following along with the kick. Cool, and let's get along into the third and final. Cool. So that is the third demo I made. So here's the kick and rumble. This is what we're going to be focusing on right now. Distorted kick, but it's dark and subby on the rumble. This kick, this is the original kick. And, you know, just distorted it and compressed it. Distortion's doing a whole lot of work here. Compressor's just adding in a little bit of attack to it. And then I'm playing with the color here to really shape the sound of the distortion. So it's really the depth is what's doing it. Changing the frequency as well when you change the depth. Also change how it sounds. And then compressor, adding in a little bit of attack. EQ, found it a little bit too much in the low end and then wanted to accentuate like that thuddy sound, I guess. Right. And then rumbles. This first rumble is actually, it's the same rumble. It's a full octave higher than the one that's doing most of the low end for it. And it's just using it for rhythm and texture over top and adding body to the rumble. So this is what the top one sounds like. It's kind of pulling you through the song. And then this bottom one, it's just there to add. With this top one, cutting out the low end. I felt it was too wide and competing with the main lead. So I just brought it in a little bit with a utility, main sub one. Just turned up the low end. Very simple. With the sidechain, once again, using Duck Buddy. Following the same shape, but this time instead of finding where the sample kind of fits it and getting like a right cycle inside of the sample, I used the track delay. It's super easy to play with to get it in phase. So you see you have like this weird bow tie effect once again, and you can start seeing it as I bump up the delay time. It starts becoming more and more in phase. And I believe I had it at 11. Maximizing the low end, maximizing it without any bow ties in the kick and rumble combination. Cool. Alright, so next up on the list for things that I think make a great techno song or any song is your hats. Your hats play a very beneficial role to anything, really. From filling in high end to adding groove and characteristics to your song. If you want to make it sound more lo-fi, you can add like more lo-fi sounding hats, because that's kind of where you get the lo-fi sound from, is that high end. For the first one, let's take a listen to. Really pay attention to the hats in this one. They're very minimal and open sounding. Once again, that plays along with how the track is and what kind of subgenre of techno it is, and also how, like, the vibe that you want of the track. So we have the two upbeat, offbeat, whatever you want to call them, hats. It has attack, punch through the mix, but they're also like big and open to where they're like taking up a whole lot of space. Not like frequency wise, but like time wise, that's what they're taking up. So you can take a look in, and they're really extending the whole eighth note here in between from when they start to the next kick. We have a ride also. This is pitched up and it has a delay on it. So that's the original. I like how it had like metallic sound to it, so I really wanted to play into that, but I didn't have anything that was metallic and like high-end E enough. So I used a shifter, frequency shifter, any frequency shifter that you want, and just turned it up 2000 hertz. So you have that metallic kind of high-end. I did throw an EQ on it, so the way that a shifter works, or like it adds low end. It kind of like, you'll see it kind of like if you watch it in like a frequency spectrum, it'll kind of like the sound, if the sound's going up, there'll be something that's going down in frequency. So in our case, I just threw, just to be safe, threw an EQ, cutting out the low end on it. And then a delay on 16th notes. Change the filter on it so it's just the high end of it, and change nothing else except for the rate. Also on the ride, I have the warping on beats, and then transient, preserve the transients, and instead of having that arrow forward and then the one underneath it, you have it on one and then stop. You just turn that down, so you play with the length of it. Found 59, sounded pretty good. Just an easy way to clean up the sound, and I did the same thing on the next one. So this loop is swung originally, but I just hit Control A while clicked into the audio file, press Control A, and then Control U or Command U. And that will just get everything in time. If you do Control Shift U, it'll bring up a menu, and you know, this is quantized to 16th notes. And then I'm doing the same exact thing, you know, beats, warp mode, and then transient, preserve the transients, and then the forward stop kind of thing, and then shortening that down as well. Originally, it just tightens it up a little bit, right? And then baked into the sample, there is kind of like a groove to the velocity, and it adds like momentum for the song, or like energy to continue the track, pretty much, to get you wanting to listen to more, and so it's not as repetitive as just a that's kind of what it's going in. And then we have just a texture, very simple, sidechained, that's it. The more things that you have in here, the more that you can like take out, and when you structure a song, as long as it's not getting cluttered and overdone, you can just add whatever you want to this. So you could even have 2 different hats, or even 3 different hats, and you can change where they come in the song. You could take one out, add one in, take another one out, and then add another one in, and then maybe even take all of them out, so it's just like your kick, like this. And the next thing you know, you want to bring in the hat. Right. And then cool so much. And then you bring in that last hat to where you have like the most amount of energy. You want like everything just going at you. This one's not crazy energy filled, but you can apply that to everything, pretty much. I can go from synths to effects to all sorts of stuff. Cool, on to the next one. This one is structured out a little bit, like I was just saying. Let's listen to it again and really pay attention to the hats. So these hats are pretty attacky, from the 16th notes to even the upbeat hats. They're all pretty attacky. and it's the aggressive sound with having that really in-your-face 303 bassline, distorted bassline sound. So they're attacky, but they're not like smacking you attack, but they just are enough attack to punch through the mix. So starting with the 2 upbeat, offbeat, whatever you want to call it, I'm playing with a fade on it, on like the longer one. You can see how it's like pulsating between the short and long. It's very subtle in the mix, but it definitely adds a lot and something that you should play around with. This top one, just adding more body because this one is more high end and it's just adding more attack to it. No processing on these, they're just panned and mixed. And for the 16th note hats in this, they're kind of playing off of each other. So first one, it's playing like it's kind of a groove that just makes you want to go. And it's playing off of, once again, it is a 1-bar loop pretty much, and it is playing with the velocity as a groove for it. So these two just play off of each other. Sounds good together. Once again, no processing, just warped and put into time. That's it. Very simple. I like also playing with the stereo field of the two, or not even of the two, of just hats in general. You can even like push rides all the way to the right and stuff. Just playing with it and seeing what feels right for the track. Most of the time, I find myself just painting something 10 to the right, 15 to the right, and then like I equal it out with painting something 5, 10, 15, 20 to the left. So it's all about like the balance and how things play off of each other in this. After that, it is structured out. I wanted to keep this 8 bars. So it is a little bit faster structure of what I would actually have in a drop. Just a hat that comes in, adds more energy into it. Let's listen. You can hear it very subtly onto your left hand. And a ride. This one is playing like a little rhythm in here, but it's just mainly following the upbeat, filling out more space, adding more energy, and cool. Very simple, but very effective. Let's get into the third example, and once again, really pay attention to the hats. So in this one, the hats are very soft, but they're also there. I didn't want them to take away from like the pads in this. I also have a clap in this, but let's focus on the hats and then I'll talk about the clap at the end. So these hats, short, adds a little bit of attack to it. Right. And then this one here, it's a little bit longer, so I have it shortened down. I just have it shortened down. With them being shorter, on the shorter side, I liked them to be kind of in the space of something, so without the reverb, kind of just dry and stale. Helps fill out more space as well. Short decay, the input filter. These are hats, so you do want like the high end of the input filter. Unless you're going for like a muted sound, I guess, but I wanted it to be airy for the reverb. And just 10%. It's very, very small amounts. Like if you overdo it, it starts being overbearing in the mix. Small percentages of it will go a long way. That's pretty much it for the upbeats. And then once again, same loop as before. The loop plays with the velocity to create a 1-bar groove pretty much. This one is doing quarter note grooves of 16th notes. And I also do have rides here. Same delay effect as before. And they are something that you can add in to add in more energy once the track gets more stale, or in like a big climax of the track. Fills up the high end more, very soft, more metallic-like. Cool. No processing on these, they're just panned. Very simple. there's so much room to experiment with in hats, especially like making your own hat rhythms and the 16th notes and stuff. There's just endless ideas that you do with it. Most of the stuff is 16th note rhythms and having that offbeat. That's pretty much like the very basics of everything, as you can see in all these. And you can play with maybe taking one out, just having and you see that the clap is gone in this. Let's run it back to the clap. It's very repetitive, even with like that 1-bar loop of the hats. Because the synths are very repetitive in this one. And just adding in a little clap can really break it up. Doesn't feel as repetitive, does it? So the clap in this one, I'm using hybrid reverb in Ableton as a delay almost. Right, it's very, very subtle in the mix, but it helps pull you into that next beat. See, it's very, very subtle, but it truly helps in the track. As you could see and hear, all these have very similar foundations, but they all sound different. And one thing that can really help with one song sounding really different from another song, even though that you have all the same things everybody else has, is your synths. So with this one, here, let's take a listen. We're back to the first demo here. So you have this kind of call and response thing going on. It starts off with this Serum preset, and it is Techno Lead 13. Pretty much it is a minor fifth on top of a sub. It's a super like 90s rave sound, but I'm just using it for that top minor fifth pretty much. This is the original preset. Pretty much like that's the classic sound, but I'm really just using it for that top note. I think the only thing that I changed was the delay and reverb. I just turned it up pretty much, and then I distorted it, and then I cut out that low note because I have the rumble playing there. Distortion really adds a lot, especially in the context of this. I wanted it to be edgy, I wanted it to be grungy, and distortion really helps with that. Just very simple, just turn up the drive, turn down the output so your volumes match pretty much. And that's followed up by the sound and operator I made. It's a distorted FM sound that's just two oscillators, both saw waves, one's with a fixed frequency. So this is pretty much how I go about making all of my operator synths, especially like these plucky ones. I'm just playing with so it's just a saw wave with a filter, but this FM really adds a whole lot of body to it, and you can that's how you get like that techno industrial-y sound, because you just have some weird messed up FM synthesis with distortion. So go in, cut out the low end, distort it, cut out the low end again because distorting adds more low end. OTT really gets an attack, brings out more high end, delay and reverb. Very basic, it really gets the job done. It also is kind of like a call and response to the original, because this isn't too distorted. The distortion's kind of like giving it character. It's still very clean at the end of the day. You have that clean signal first, and then you have that response of this dirty, right? So that's kind of like the call and response, and then you have like an overall call and response of a different melody in that second half here. When things play off of each other, especially in the leads, it really helps tie the track together. And then last thing, I just have a low reverse. It's out of a loop, and this is the original loop. I just took that ding and reversed it and pitched it up 5 semitones so it matches the key of the song, or it's in scale of the key in the song. The key is D, minor, and this is pitched up to an A, which is a perfect fifth above that root note of a D. It also fits because the kick is also in an A, and it's just a really powerful note in that scale. That's pretty much it for the synths on this one. Once again, I tried to go for minimal sound for this and kind of ended up with that. Next up, we have a 303 acid kind of synth. Very distorted, kind of all over the place. So first off, I got this loop here. I didn't make the loop. There's this sweet Max for Live plugin called Sting. Very easy if you want to get like very quick acid bass line. Throw that on. In our case, I recorded it out to an external MIDI track. If you don't know how to do that, you just create a new MIDI track and you take the input. So this all ends is the MIDI input, what you're referencing, and then you'll take that from, in our case, 36 Serum, whichever has that Sting on it. And then you'll press record and then record. See, coming in down there. And then I just moved it up, turned off Sting. I'm using basically TB303. You can play with the cutoff. All the main things are macroed in for easy tuning. And I really wanted it to be super crunchy, right? So I'm just using an overdrive, 23%, not even a quarter. And just very subtle, but it really makes it crunchy. Cut out the low end, and it was a little too much, around 1K, so I just turned that down with the EQ. And it was kind of just so I wanted to automate a delay when this top note hit. I'm doing that in a parallel chain. So I group the delay and then you just go over to the side, create new chain and stuff. So I have a utility that is muted constantly until I automate it till it's off, till it allows sound through. And that triggers on that high note, and that will just feed into the delay and just go. So it's on dotted eighth notes, feedback 78%, and then dry wet turned all the way up because it is in a parallel chain. And also, I want it to have like a little bit more stereo to it on that hit. So I added in a chorus. And that's just automated on just for that one note. And we can even play around with this. Cool. Another great idea right there. So Sting is just generates random bass lines every time they click the smiley face. Really cool if you're getting into acid techno and stuff like that. Next up, Demo 3. You've heard this. Cool. So these are both made with Serum Presets found in the Avant Techno. This one, it's actually a respace. So here's the breeze. It has a plus 19 semitone, so which is octave, and then plus that fifth again. So it kind of sounds chordy, like it's playing a chord. In my case, instead of using it as a res, I'm using it more of like a pad. So it's going in between the root note, which is D sharp in this song, and like the low D sharp, and then it's going up an octave. Just EQ'd out, that's pretty much it. Really just get creative, get a good solid foundation. Like I was saying, you have that kick and rumble and the hats. That's pretty much the foundation to a techno song. And just start jamming. This one, I was just bored. I was going to add in like a 16th note bass just to add in more texture to it, but I stumbled across the pad in this, and I thought it sounded cool, and I played with the notes, and this is what I ended up with. Very repetitive, but it really, it's not like the annoying repetitive, it's more like a trance-like repetitive. So really cool. And then the next one, very simple. This one is actually a techno pad. I believe I just changed with the decay and sustain on this one. Once again, it's very simple. It's just saw waves with a filter. And then I'm modulating the filter to open up over time and close over time. At the end, it opens up more than it usually does throughout the whole loop, which really helps it tie back to the beginning, and it adds like a good turnaround. You can hear how it like subtly opens, and then this one. Very simple, gets the point across, and it gets a good constant vibe. It gets a great, it's good, and it's just techno, man. Make something that sounds good, and you got a good song. That's really what all it comes down to. It sounds good, it sounds good. Just rolling off the lows. Don't want it interfering with the rumble, especially in that low mids, because this rumble is very low mids heavy. See in this area. Cool. Let's go into effects. Effects for me can be used very sparsely, but can do a lot. So let's go back to the first one. You have the classic down sweep. That just sets a boom, this is a downbeat right now. Because you really could just start this anywhere and you don't really have a definitive downbeat. I mean, you do, but you don't have that one main downbeat. Especially when you get into DJing live, it's really crucial to have something that you can go back to and be like, okay, this is the downbeat. I know that, and I can start counting here. Fall does that, crash does that, a lot of risers, and when that riser goes, boom, you have the loop starting over again pretty much. And then I'm just using textures in the background. I have like this vinyl noise panned around, and it's just filling in. It's very subtle, but it just like feels empty. And then I have some rain that I recorded. It's not really rain, it's just noise with a little bit of texture to it. This is just getting filtered to the mids around the 1K. It just fills up more space in the mix. And also, a lot of times in the classic tracks, and a lot of tracks do this now, but it was very strong in the 90s. They would have like a synthetic string or like an actual string, like a violin, play a very high note, which usually is the root note of the song. So I'm once again doing that, or I'm doing something like that, very synthetically with a Serum preset. And the two notes are A and G sharp. Once again, that's going back to being the fifth in the scale. G sharp is not in D minor. But when you use notes that aren't in scale, you can get away with it sometimes, especially in uses like this. It adds a lot of tension, and it's because they're very close together. They have dissonance. So say let's get rid of that G sharp. It's just annoying to have that like ringing sound. But now this sounds like dark and mysterious because you have that dissonance. And even more, and this patch is very dissonant already because the two wavetables are not in the same tuning. So you do have that phasing once again, and then you have even more phasing playing these two notes so closely together. So let's listen to it without. Just feels very empty, right? And then with, it just feels fuller. That's where I really like using effects and textures and stuff for. And it can really like set a soundscape for the track. Tons of atmospheres in this pack. Great to use. Cool, let's check out the second one. This one is much more sparse because you have this 303. You have this just taking up so much of the spectrum, so you don't really need too much of the textures in it. It's just down sweeps, adding impact to this track. It just loses the impact. Cool. Very simple. Definitely play with stuff like that. If you think your track feels empty and sparse, definitely try to throw in an atmosphere or something like that. Even like a subtle pad in the background can fill out the track. And let's get into the last one. This one doesn't have any textures because, once again, I'm kind of using this pad to fill up that spectrum. You just have fall and another fall pretty much. It just helps with the turnaround points and, once again, the impacts for going through the drop. I do have another fall in here that kind of ties, it's kind of like a fill almost, that ties it into the next section. But there's really nothing changing, but you can create that movement of the song with effects like this. Once again, just very simple. You shouldn't overthink it. It's nothing too complex with effects and stuff like that. If you're really struggling with it, definitely check out some of your favorite songs in the genre that you're making and see how they use effects to progress their song as well. Yeah, I'll probably turn one of these into like a full song, show you how to structure it, and show you how to create tension, how to create releases, show you how to progress like a very basic 8-bar loop into something much more substantial, something that you could show your mother one day. If you want any of the sounds used in this tutorial, the link is down below along with the discount code. Next video after this one should be how to make a rumble. I'll be including a free Ableton rack for that if you're an Ableton user. Yeah, cool. Have a good day.